Maplewood Estates looked perfect from the outside. Manicured lawns stretched like green carpets between pristine sidewalks, white picket fences gleamed in the afternoon sun, and the houses, nearly identical in design, reflected an image of suburban harmony. But perfection, I learned quickly, can hide a subtle tyranny. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, nestled neatly in our mailbox, its weight betraying the importance it carried. Sarah, my wife, noticed it first. Her brow furrowed as she examined the embossed HOA crest and the thick stationery that signaled authority. She tore it open, and my eyes followed hers to the bold, stark letters. Special assessment fee, $250,000. I stared. Then I blinked. Then I read it again. They want what? I asked, incredulous. Sarah's jaw tightened. It's real. Look, there are clauses about community improvements, aesthetic upgrades, but this amount? It's impossible. Impossible wasn't the word. Absurd might have been closer. The HOA claimed the fee was necessary to fund renovations, new gates, decorative fountains, streetscaping, but the explanation was vague, almost deliberately so. They threatened liens, legal action, and potential foreclosure for noncompliance. I sank into a chair, running a hand over my face. This can't be legal. It's technically legal if the board votes, Sarah said, her voice steady but edged with frustration. But it's unethical. And it's bullying. And then I remembered Karen. Karen Whitfield, the self-appointed queen of Maplewood Estates, chaired the HOA with a precision bordering on obsession. Her suits were sharp, her nails immaculate, and her clipboard was never far from her side. For years, she had patrolled the streets with quiet menace, fining neighbors for minor infractions, grass slightly over regulation height, trash cans left out too long, holiday decorations deemed inappropriate. Everyone feared her. Everyone complied. Everyone except Sarah. Sarah had always been measured, diplomatic, patient. She avoided conflict, preferring compromise and calm reasoning. But this was different. This was extortion, pure and simple. Her eyes, usually gentle, now burned with resolve. I'm not paying, she said, placing the envelope firmly on the kitchen counter. Not a penny. She can't do this. Her defiance was the spark that lit the tinderbox. I felt a surge of pride, tinged with concern. Standing up to Karen was more than a challenge. It was a provocation. That evening, the neighborhood hummed with quiet tension. Word of the $250,000 assessment had spread, and whispers drifted across manicured lawns and fenced yards. Neighbors shared their own disbelief, but fear kept most from speaking aloud. Karen's reputation as a relentless enforcer of rules had ensured that silence prevailed. She threatened foreclosure, one neighbor muttered, shaking a crumpled notice. She can't actually do that, another whispered, though the uncertainty in her tone betrayed her fear. Then, as if on cue, Karen appeared. She strode down the street in her signature heels, clipboard in hand, radiating authority. Her eyes scanned the neighborhood, sharp and calculating. She didn't need to speak to command attention. Her presence alone silenced casual conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice sugar-coated but firm, I trust everyone has received their notices. Our community's prestige requires investment, and sacrifices must be made. A hush fell over the neighbors. No one challenged her. No one, except Sarah. This isn't an investment, Sarah said, stepping forward, her voice clear and unwavering. It's extortion. No family here can pay that amount. Karen's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? You heard me, Sarah said, her hands steady at her sides. We will not be bullied into submission. A sharp silence followed. Karen's lips pressed together, her composure flickering for a brief instant. Then, as if deciding she would not be intimidated by a single voice, she straightened and hissed, "You'll regret this." She turned and walked away, heels clicking against the pavement, leaving a trail of tension and curiosity in her wake. The crowd slowly dispersed, glancing at us with awe and unease. Back in the kitchen, Sarah exhaled deeply. "She's going to make our lives miserable," she said, though her defiance hadn't wavered. I nodded, staring at the envelope that had started it all. Then we'll face it together. But Karen has no idea what she's about to awaken. For now, the stage was set. The villain had been revealed. The rules were unfair. And a quiet storm of resistance had begun to take shape. The first battle was won in principle. But the war? That was just beginning. The following days transformed our quiet street into a theater of intimidation. It started subtly, almost innocuously. Bright orange violation notices appeared on our front door, each stapled with meticulous precision. Lawn too long. Trash bins left out for a minute too long. Garden ornaments deemed non-compliant. Each slip carried a fine, small at first, then progressively larger, until the underlying threat, the $250,000 assessment, loomed like a storm cloud over every minor infraction. Sarah handled each notice with a controlled frustration, crumpling them but never allowing her composure to falter. "They're trying to wear us down," she said one morning, tossing a fresh slip into the trash. Her knuckles were white, yet her voice remained steady. "But we won't let them succeed." I nodded, silently calculating. Karen thrived on control, and the smallest sign of hesitation could embolden her. But Sarah's resolve, visible in every tense set of her shoulders and every glare she directed at the mailbox, told me she wasn't backing down. She never had. By midweek, the tactics grew more aggressive. Members of the HOA began appearing on our street in pairs, clipboards in hand, pretending casual strolls while their eyes measured and judged every detail of our property. Neighbors who once nodded politely as we passed now looked away, unwilling to meet our gaze. Fear had silenced them, and Karen had mastered the art of making silence complicit. Sarah refused to let fear dictate her actions. When the monthly HOA meeting rolled around, she insisted we attend. The clubhouse, usually a sterile room for perfunctory announcements, felt charged with anticipation. Karen's presence was commanding. She perched behind the podium with the confidence of a sovereign, clipboard in hand, surveying the crowd. "Before we proceed," Karen began, her voice both sweet and sharp, "I must address certain households that appear resistant to the community's needs." Her gaze locked onto Sarah. I could see the subtle twitch of recognition in Karen's expression, the realization that this would not be a simple confrontation. "This fee is extortion," Sarah said, rising to her feet. Her voice was measured, deliberate, yet carried the weight of someone who refused to yield. "We will not comply with demands that are unreasonable and unlawful." A murmur ran through the room, a mixture of surprise and fear. Karen's composure remained, though the slightest tightening around her eyes betrayed irritation. "Unlawful," Karen echoed, her tone almost incredulous. "The board voted. The bylaws are explicit. Refusal carries consequences." Sarah's reply was unwavering. "Consequences do not equal justice. You cannot leverage fear and intimidation to extract money from families." The room fell silent. The weight of Karen's authority pressed down on everyone, yet Sarah held her ground. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line, and I could see the momentary flicker of doubt cross her features. After the meeting, the harassment escalated outside the clubhouse. Notices began arriving in greater frequency. An inspector appeared at our fence, claiming it exceeded city regulations. Our mailbox was found knocked down, a dead rodent wrapped in an HOA violation notice left on our porch one night. Sarah, though shaken, never wavered in her stance. "If we retreat now," she told me quietly one evening, "Karen wins. We're not just defending ourselves, we're defending every family here." Her words resonated. Karen wasn't merely attacking us. She was sending a warning, a demonstration of power to the neighborhood. Compliance was the desired result, fear the method. I kept my focus, studying bylaws and legal statutes. I didn't need to act impulsively, strategy would be our weapon. Yet even in restraint, the tension between what Karen could do and what we were prepared to endure thickened the air. Then, one afternoon, the escalation hit a new peak. Sarah returned home to find two men stapling an official-looking notice to the front door. "What is this?" she demanded. "Order from the HOA," one replied, shrugging. Foreclosure proceedings initiated. Her eyes widened, but she held her ground. This is illegal, she shouted. We're current on our mortgage. The men shrugged, walking away as if their role had ended. But the message had been delivered. Karen was willing to weaponize the law to intimidate us. I arrived just as Sarah tore the notice down, hands shaking but unbowed. She's gone too far, she whispered, and for the first time, her fury was matched by fear. In that moment, it became clear that this conflict was no longer just about money. It was about power, control, and courage. Karen's reach extended across the neighborhood, but she had underestimated us. She didn't know the depth of our resolve. The stage was set for the confrontation that would define everything. Karen, armed with fear and authority, and Sarah and I, armed with defiance, strategy, and principle. The coming days would determine who truly held the power in Maplewood Estates, and who would crumble under it. The wail of sirens cut through the late afternoon air, sharp and insistent. Sarah froze in the doorway, her hands gripping the frame as if it were a lifeline. Across the street, Karen's smug smile was proof that she had expected the police to reinforce her threats. She held her phone up, still connected to the call she had made moments before, as though summoning authority with a flick of her finger could compel obedience. I stepped forward, careful and deliberate, my gaze steady. The patrol car rolled to a stop, and 2 officers stepped out, badges gleaming in the sun. Their eyes flicked between us and Karen, taking in the scene like analysts sizing up a problem. "This is Officer Daniels," Karen began, her voice sharp with confidence. "We have a homeowner." "Excuse me," I interrupted, calm but firm. "You need the full context before assuming anything. My wife is being harassed, threatened, and intimidated by an HOA board member. This is not a criminal matter on our part. The escalation here is entirely initiated by her." Karen blinked, taken aback by the interruption. Officer Daniels, tall with a cautious stance, focused on me. "Sir, yes?" I allowed the silence to hang, letting the weight of my posture and tone register. There was a subtle gravity in the way I stood, a presence not manufactured, but earned. Daniels's eyes narrowed in recognition, though the moment passed almost unnoticed. General Carter," he whispered, a flicker of shock passing across his features. I inclined my head slightly, measured. "Yes, that's correct." Karen's smug certainty evaporated in an instant. Her face paled, her eyes flicking from me to the officers, then to the neighbors who had begun gathering. The power she had wielded so effortlessly now recoiled against her. Daniels straightened instantly, his professional demeanor replaced by unmistakable respect. "Yes, General." "Understood," he said, nodding sharply. I turned my gaze toward Karen, calm but cutting. "This ends now. You have harassed my family, threatened our home, and abused your position. Any further action on your part will be documented and pursued to its fullest legal extent." Karen opened her mouth, but no words came. Her authority, once absolute in Maplewood Estates, faltered visibly. The crowd that had feared her began whispering among themselves, curiosity mixing with relief. "You can't," she started, voice quivering. "I understand the bylaws perfectly," I said, cutting her off. "And so will the courts. Your intimidation ends here." Officer Daniels stepped forward, signaling his partner to begin documenting the scene. Karen, who had imagined herself the puppet master, was now a spectator of her own unraveling. Every violation she had committed, every intimidation tactic she had employed, was being recorded in front of the very people she had ruled through fear. Sarah, standing beside me, exhaled slowly. Relief mingled with lingering tension. "Does this mean we're safe?" she asked softly, a trace of disbelief in her tone.
"For now," I said.
"But Karen will test limits again if she sees weakness. That's why we must remain vigilant. Authority is not demanded, it is recognized when earned." Karen tried once more to reassert control. "You don't understand. This is about bylaws and obligations." I shook my head, firm. It is about abuse of power. Laws exist to protect people, not to enforce tyranny. The neighbors, emboldened, began voicing their own concerns. A murmur grew, questioning Karen's legitimacy and the fairness of the $250,000 assessment. Whispers became sentences, sentences became voices, voices that no longer cowered. The tide had turned. As the officers finalized their report and prepared to leave, Karen's last vestiges of confidence disintegrated. She slinked back, defeated, her once commanding presence reduced to whispered excuses and empty threats. Sarah reached out and took my hand, squeezing it gently. "I can't believe this, we actually stood up to her." I nodded, gazing at the crowd now murmuring freely. We did more than stand. We shifted the balance of power. Fear only works when you allow it to. She underestimated us, and everyone here learned the same lesson. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. Karen's authority had been stripped in full view of the community. The first battle was over, but the war for justice and balance in Maplewood Estates was just beginning. For the first time in months, the street felt different. Cautious, yes, but also alive, with the hum of possibility, the faint murmur of hope. The oppressive reign of fear had cracked, and from those cracks, the promise of accountability began to seep in. Maplewood Estates woke the next morning to an unfamiliar quiet. The manicured lawns and pristine sidewalks were the same, yet the atmosphere had shifted. Karen's reign of intimidation had been publicly challenged, and whispers of disbelief and relief flowed through the neighborhood. The fear that had once kept everyone silent now trembled on the edge of exposure. Officer Daniel's report from the previous confrontation had already been filed, documenting every incident of harassment, every threat, and every violation committed by Karen. That single report became a lever, a tool through which the HOA's authority could finally be held accountable. Our attorney reviewed the case swiftly, outlining the avenues for immediate action. Within days, Karen's $250,000 special assessment was formally challenged in court. The legal proceedings moved deliberately, stripping Karen of any ability to manipulate outcomes. The judge declared the fee unenforceable, citing overreach by the HOA and a lack of legal justification. Notices went out to all residents, clarifying that the assessment was invalid and warning of potential legal consequences should Karen attempt collection. For the first time, the neighbors were armed not only with knowledge but with protection under the law. The impact was immediate. Meetings that had once felt stifling and hostile became forums for transparency. Homeowners voiced concerns openly, asking questions and debating policies that had long been dictated from a single perspective. Karen, stripped of authority, found her influence dwindling as her board members abandoned her side, unwilling to risk further legal scrutiny or community backlash. Sarah and I watched quietly, aware that our personal victory had shifted the neighborhood's dynamic. No longer targets, we became catalysts. Neighbors who had once hidden behind polite smiles and cautious greetings now approached us, seeking guidance and reassurance. We didn't realize anyone would fight back, one confessed, gratitude flickering in his eyes. "Thank you for showing us courage." Sarah's response was calm, her voice measured. "It wasn't just us. You all needed to see that fear doesn't have to dictate your choices." The following weeks brought tangible change. HOA bylaws were clarified, fines regulated, and oversight introduced to prevent future abuse. Karen's attempts to challenge the changes were futile, each letter and threat met with legal rebuttal and community scrutiny. Her remaining influence faded completely, leaving her isolated and discredited. For us, the most significant victory was personal. Our home, once a battlefield, became a sanctuary again. We reclaimed our privacy, our peace, and our confidence. Yet the sense of accomplishment extended beyond the walls of our house. Maplewood Estates had transformed from a neighborhood ruled by intimidation to one guided by transparency, accountability, and mutual respect. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Sarah leaned against me on the porch. We watched children play freely on the street, laughter filling the air without fear of reprisal. "Do you ever regret standing up?" she asked softly. I shook my head. Not for a second. Standing up for what's right isn't about courage alone. It's about strategy, patience, and persistence. Karen learned that the hard way. Sarah laughed quietly, a sound light and unburdened. I can't believe we lived through all of that. Neither can most of the neighborhood, I replied. But what matters is that we changed the outcome. Fear no longer rules here. Across the street, neighbors waved as they walked home from evening errands. Some still glanced nervously toward the now quiet house at the center of the conflict, but their expressions were no longer of submission. They reflected a cautious optimism. Karen's reign had ended, her power stripped by exposure, community unity, and the law. As night fell, the lights from the houses cast a warm glow across the street. Maplewood Estates was the same physically, yet everything had changed. The streets hummed with quiet resilience, the kind that grows when people realize their voices and their courage matter. The $250,000 assessment that had threatened to upend lives became a symbol, not of loss, but of triumph. The story of a community that refused to be bullied, the tale of a family that stood firm, and the lesson that authority, when abused, can always be challenged. Sarah rested her head on my shoulder, the tension of weeks finally easing. "We did it," she whispered. "Yes," I said, looking out over the neighborhood bathed in the gentle glow of streetlights. "We did, and Maplewood Estates will never forget it." The shadows stretched across the lawns, long and soft. They no longer threatened, no longer carried intimidation. They reminded everyone that even the darkest power, when faced with courage and persistence, can be brought into the light. And with that, the story of fear, defiance, and ultimate justice came to its close.